Hey guys, it's me, Seren, back with another video. So this is a follow-up video that I wanted to do on, really not a follow-up video, it's really kind of a spin-off, like a part two almost, of the video that I posted about Michael B. Jordan's comments on mythology and folklore. And I wanted to do this video because I was reading comments that you guys were leaving on that video, some really great, interesting comments, and I was also chatting with a subscriber on Instagram who is Prince Girl here on YouTube. Hi. And I wanted to make this video about, I'm gonna loosely say what is culture, but that's like sort of, we'll just leave it at that, like loosely, even though that's one of those type of questions that it's sort of like one of those kind of funky questions, like, but what is culture? What is culture? Okay? What is considered culture? It's funny because I have a friend that is an artist that we have been having this I swear we've been having this conversation about what is culture in one form or another for probably the last like 2 or 3 years. And it just like keeps coming up and it keeps coming up. And it's like, I keep hitting against this wall. I keep hitting against this wall when it comes to like what is culture and cultural appropriation and all this type of stuff. And we've talked about this previously in my video that I did on Kanye West and art, because I've talked about how a lot of Kanye West's artistic vision and aesthetic is kind of filtered through the white gaze. If you haven't seen that video on Kanye West and the white gaze, as always, links in the description box or if by clicking the eye on the right-hand corner. But in that video, I talked somewhat about how Kanye's ideas, a lot of his ideas at this point in his career about art and culture are filtered through the white gaze, and specifically this really white Eurocentric, gaze of these, these white male European artists, up on these, these white walls. There's this idea of white walls, right? In this artistic jargon almost, of that your art and therefore your culture and your ideas are not real, they're not legitimized until they're up on those white walls, until they're in this space, right? They're in this gallery space, they're in this art space, they're recognized in this really particular type of way that historically has only recognized white male Eurocentric art and culture as legitimate. And so your idea of art and culture is kind of filtered through that. And I think as we get into more of these conversations about culture, about ethnicity, about history, and about heritage, we're going to be talking about this more and more. I also talked about this somewhat in previous videos when we've talked about Black American culture. I don't know how many of you guys remember me talking about this on Twitter when I had a Twitter account, but I know I've mentioned this in other videos previously, talking to people that say like, well, Hennessy and gold hoops isn't culture. What led to that conversation was people were saying when the African American History Museum first opened in DC, I saw some people talking on Twitter about how they went to the museum and they saw like FUBU shit in there, like for us, by us, they seen like Carl Kanai shit in there, they seen cross color shit in there, they seen Walker wear in there, Black American kind of, urban streetwear. And I saw some people that were saying like, that doesn't belong in a museum. That doesn't belong in a history and culture museum. Like that's not real, right? Again, getting into these words, what is culture? What is real? That's not real culture. That's not real history. And I remember saying like, well, what do you mean it's not? And they were like, well, it's not really old and it's not really, culture. And then we started getting into, well, what is considered culture? I said, well, is Hennessy and gold hoops culture? Hennessy and gold hoops isn't culture. It's like, okay, but again, and I know the example that I use because I always use this example because I've been to DR, so it's just the first one that comes to mind. If I go to DR and I drink fucking Presidentes and Coquito and I wear some fucking earrings that they make specifically in DR and I fucking dance bachata, is that not culture? Yes. And it would be considered as such. But if I go to DC and I wear gold hoops and I drink Hennessy and I dance to fucking go-go, I beat my feet and shit, that is not considered culture, right? And even kind of unpacking a little bit more of even Michael B. Jordan's statements and these sentiments about and I'm going to talk about Black Americans really specifically right now. about Black Americans specifically not having culture. There's a lot of this type of conversation and this dialogue of, well, our culture is not real, right? I remember there every single year around motherfucking Kwanzaa time, there's this fucking argument of that Kwanzaa is not real. It's not a real holiday. It's made up. It's a made up holiday. And then inevitably you get the pushback of like, well, fucking everything is made up. Every fucking holiday is made up. You know, like everything has roots somewhere, but ultimately it's something that somebody made up and decided that, I just took my socks off in case you noticed, that ultimately someone made up and decided was art, decided was culture, decided was important enough to celebrate it and elevate it, right? And there's this idea that Black Americans and our culture specifically, again, that it's not real, that it does not exist, that it is not legitimate. That's the word I want. There's something very illegitimate in the eyes of the world, in the eyes of the diaspora, in the eyes of everyone about Black Americans and our culture. Again, getting into this idea that we are lost, that we are confused, we have no home, we have no culture, we don't belong anywhere, you know, that there is something illegitimate about us and our culture. Oh, well, it's too young. Oh, well, stuff from the 90s what is that doing in a fucking museum? What is some FUBU shit from 94 doing in a museum? That's not history. That's not culture, you know? And something that was sent to me by Prince Girl was, so something that somebody said on Twitter in defense of Michael B. Jordan was, well, maybe he doesn't know that there is Black folklore and mythology because that's something you learn in school. It was like roughly something like that. I believe I saved it, but it was something like, you know, well, I'm a first generation college student and no one in my family knows Black folklore and mythology, and people don't have access to learn about this type of stuff through academia. You know, this idea that culture, because Black folklore and mythology is culture, food is culture, the songs you sing is culture, you know, these things all make up the tapestry that is a person's culture, right? So kind of this idea that, well, culture has to be legitimized in the eyes of academia, right? Y'all know how I feel about these motherfucking Black academics, y'all. These niggas are so smart, they are dumb, right? You are the dumbest smart person I have ever met, in the immortal words of Will Smith in motherfucking I, Robot, right? Like this idea that culture has to be legitimized through academia. It has to be legitimized on these white walls. It has to be legitimized by going through these spaces and these avenues for it to even become culture. And if you, person, Michael B. Jordan or whoever, have not gone through those avenues, have not gone through that academia, have not gone through those white walls, then it's perfectly fine and reasonable for you to not know about Black folklore and Black mythology and culture, right? Because you haven't had access to this space. And that was just so wild to me, because I was like, culture is not something that has to be legitimized in the eyes of academia. Like, that's not even what culture is. Like, culture is not something that has to be legitimate. It's cool that they have the African American History Museum, but the culture exists regardless of if it's in the motherfucking museum or not. It exists regardless of if Michael B. Jordan had access to academic spaces or not. And especially with regards to Black American mythology and folklore, it does not live in fucking academia. That's not it. And you know what? I'm pretty sure I fucking saved the shit. So hold on. Got it. So it's cut off and I really don't care about the full whatever. The response to Michael B. Jordan saying we don't have Black folklore and mythology is exposing people's academic privilege, right? So there's this idea that those of us that are saying we know about Black folklore and mythology, we learned it in school, or that this was something that we picked up in academia because we had access into these academic spaces. And this person at Kima Jones replied by saying, Black mythology lives in our backyards, churches, mosques, porches, barbershops, salons. It's why we don't let cats near newborns or allow pregnant women at funerals. We're not talking about theory. We're talking about Black imaginations. Nothing to do with academia. And you guys know, and I keep saying this, like I don't like these Black academics. I don't like these fucking black academics. And y'all know also I hate this rhetoric, and I hate theory, and I hate these academic theories, and I fucking don't like these people that don't know nothing about no real people. They don't know anything about real fucking people. They don't know about fucking your grandma telling you the motherfucking boo hag gonna come ride your ass all night if you don't go to sleep right now. And I know some of y'all know about the fucking scary ass boo hag. The bitch is a witch, alright? She rides bad little kids all night. You get up in the morning feeling like you haven't fucking slept a wink because she was riding you all night. And the only way to fucking capture her ass is to capture her in a glass bottle with a needle, and you put the cork on top, and then you put the other motherfucking needles on top. Pick up some Virginia Hamilton, okay? But even before I had the book, the Virginia Hamilton book, that was a story that my grandmother told me as a child, right? Culture, mythology, folklore lives in our backyards, churches, mosques, porches, barbershops, salons. It's why we don't let cats near newborns or allow pregnant women at funerals. We just watch Skeleton Key, right? It's why you put brick dust in front of your fucking door for an enemy. That's not something they learned about in a motherfucking book. That's not something they learned about at school. Not to say that it's unimportant to have these type of studies, because it is important to have, you know, these type of studies. I mean, like, again, like, I'm no fucking fan of academia, but yes, it is also important to have these types of studies in these types of spaces as well. Not to say that it's unimportant, but that is not even on average the way that folklore and mythology as a thing, as a concept, the way that culture works. Like, what is this idea, you know, like, if my aunt fucking used to boil cabbage and cook greens with turkey necks and cook macaroni and cheese and cook upside down cakes and put them in a glass fucking bowl cake thing that nobody was allowed to touch in the fucking dining room that nobody was allowed to go into. We could only go in there and eat the motherfucking cake on Christmas, right? Like, that food, that memory, that's culture right there, right? And we sit around the table and we fucking eat and we talk and we tell stories. That is folklore also. That is mythology also. That is culture also. That is not something that exists in a classroom, right? And again, just like I said with the whole racial Dolezal situation, you have these fucking people that really believe that they could learn everything about the motherfucking black experience, and especially the black American experience, in a goddamn classroom. Like, they think that everything is fucking filtered through academia, and number one, they think if you don't know, it's because you, like, didn't go to school or some shit, like, which, wrong. And number two, they don't have no understanding of real life, real people, real ideas. They don't have no fucking concept of that shit. If you fucking come in my house and you open a motherfucking umbrella, we're gonna have a problem. If you come in my house with a hat on and you don't take it off, we're gonna have a problem. God forbid if you're fucking sweeping and you sweep over my bare fucking feet, I might punch you in the face. Like, just like a reflex, like, without even thinking about it. That's not something that I learned about in school, right? Like, that is not something I learned about in a class. Again, that is black mythology right there. That is folklore right there. That is a part of our culture. And it doesn't have to be filtered through a white gaze. It doesn't have to be up on a white wall. And it doesn't have to be something you sat in a classroom and learned about for it to be legitimized. So, I want to start there, even though I know I've been talking for a fucking long ass time already, and this is also going to play into a comment that I received on Instagram as well. But before I get to the comment that I received on Instagram, let me read you guys this. Some of the conversation that I was having with Prince Girl. I said, black folklore and mythology is not something that lives in academia. That's almost offensive as a statement. I hate too smart Twitter, so smart that your ass is dumb. Like, you didn't have a grandma tell you bedtime stories. That is also folklore and mythology. Like, folklore and mythology is not just something you learn in your folklore and mythology class at fucking college. And this person said, I was a first-generation college student. My parents barely had high school education and had working poor parents who had sparse time for storytelling. I had no awareness of black folklore until college in my 20s. And I was like, Me personally, I was also a first generation college student. Like, what is that supposed to mean? That Black folklore is for college students? Everybody in my family works at the phone company. Like, what are they talking about? This is why I hate these Black academics. They think everything with value filters through academics, and it does not. Black folklore is not just something for college courses and public education. That shit has nothing to do with what folklore and mythology even is. Folklore and mythology is your grandma telling you to go to sleep right away before the boo-hag come ride your bad ass when you're a little kid. It has nothing to do with academia, right? And it's just like, and then I also got sent like some other tweets from some other people. Black Americans have an abundance of mythology and folklore born of the slave era that simply isn't taught. We are losing culture for that main reason, and folks with platforms don't actually care enough about elders or history to find out. Like, let's talk about oral tradition. Do y'all can we all collectively Google oral tradition, where you pass down ideas and mythology and folklore through an oral tradition, through storytelling? Even if you didn't have a grandma, did you have a friend? Did you have a friend with a grandma? Did you have an aunt? Did you have an uncle? Did you have a mom? Or did you have a dad? Or did you have a cousin? Or again, even if you personally had none of those things, none of you and your friends didn't fucking tell dumbass stories at lunchtime, all those things, again, are part of this tapestry that makes up folklore, tradition, mythology, and culture. I'm going to go ahead and say that this really annoys me when y'all nitpick stuff like this in America, where Black Americans have been living, breathing, and talking about themselves for hundreds of years. Again, getting into this idea of talking to each other, talking about these stories, passing them on, not just resting on this idea that everything important is filtered through academia or a screen or white walls in an art gallery or through the white gaze, Academic privilege, because this person was like, oh, you have academic privilege if you know what Black folklore is. Somebody was like, academic privilege is growing up in the South and being told stories by my grandmother, going to the library and reading Uncle Remus stories, but Jordan can shoot films in Atlanta but never bother to visit the wren's nest. That's lack of curiosity, not privilege. And I love that comment because, again, we're talking about, now in terms of Michael B. Jordan doesn't even have the motherfucking excuse of, well, I didn't have access to a space. No, nigga, you have all the money and all the Google in the fucking world. You have access to a lot of spaces, especially if your point of reference is going to be, I'm creating my own production company to tell stories. You could have done a little bit of digging deep into some fucking research. Like, I do the bare minimum of research for, like, my videos and, like, my hidden figures and stuff like that. Like, you could do some, like, and I don't have, like, 1/10 of the resources that are available at Michael B. Jordan's fucking disposal. So we can go ahead and start there, okay? That he doesn't even have the excuse of not having the fucking resources. Yes, there are people. Everybody doesn't know everything. And yes, there are people that do not have resources to, obviously, certain types of academic, spaces. But folklore and mythology is not something that exists solely within an academic space. So that's a weird fucking excuse. Like, it's really strange to me to use that. And somebody left a comment on the video that was like, I know, and then I'm gonna read some other comments too. This is what I was saying that I was gonna tie into. I know Black Americans have culture, but even if we didn't, it doesn't make anyone better than us. That idea is elitist, just like when people are looked down upon for not knowing art or knowing which utensil to use in a formal dining set. And I replied, I said, the idea of thinking you're better than someone because you have culture and they don't have culture is obviously elitist, but this is a weird argument to make, the argument of even if we didn't, because everyone has culture. The idea of culture is not elitist. You're getting culture, again, and mythology and folklore mixed up with fancy ideas about art and literature, which is not culture. Culture, mythology, folklore is the food you eat, the songs you sing, the stories you tell. There is nothing elitist about culture. Culture is not knowing about art or which utensils to use, even though people might describe that as being cultured, right? The idea that you know about art and you know about which utensils to use and you know about Van Gogh, people might say like, oh, you're so cultured. But we really have mixed up in our minds this idea of what culture even is. Like, there's this idea that culture is something fancy, again, that it has to fit into these certain parameters to even be considered legitimate, right? And that culture is something like fucking fancy. Like, culture is something super fucking fancy, and that if you don't have access to the academic spaces, or if the white walls, and if you don't know about the art, and if you don't know about the utensils, and if you don't know about this, and if you don't know about that, then you don't have culture. And I get where that idea came from, but it's a bad idea. It's a bad idea. And we need to release these ideas of art and culture and folklore and mythology as being something that has to be legitimized 9 times out of 10 through avenues that perpetuate racist white supremacist hierarchies and the white gaze. Yeah. So I'm gonna read you guys some more comments. I felt sad for him when he said that, and the black folks on Twitter that agreed with him, talk about Michael B. Jordan, there are quite a few BA who think like him. The number of "we missed out on our African culture" tweets is exhausting. And what did I say when Black Panther came out? I was like, niggas, have some motherfucking self-respect. You are not lost. You are not confused. You are not homeless. That's all a brainwashing rhetoric and talking points that's meant to make you feel like you are not shit. And that is not true. And I'm sure, like most Black Americans, he has Southern roots. Where the hell has he been? I was born and raised in Harlem, but my grandmother, great-grandmother, and great-great-great-grandmother were all from Gettysburg, North Carolina. Come on. I know other Black folk from within the diaspora other Black folk from within the diaspora were going to sink their teeth into his statement. We're specifically talking about our folklore and mythology. I'm happy that BAs defended our rich traditions on Twitter. And somebody replied, OMG, the "we missed out on being African" tweets are everywhere, dog. And I'm just like, please get some racial pride about yourselves. I'm begging you. Like descendants of American chattel slavery need to really get some motherfucking pride in our ethnicity. Like, again, you are not lost. You are not confused. You have survived some shit that a lot of people would not be able to fucking survive. You have culture, you have folklore, you have history, you have heritage, you have mythology. The system of racism, white supremacy is what's made you believe you don't have these things, and you are parroting it, and you are also listening to these fucking foreign blacks that are parroting the same shit at you so that they can feel better about themselves and feel like they're moving up in this hierarchy to be closer to whiteness. Like, stop doing that shit. The crazy thing about it is, all up and through those threads are foreign blacks basically big upping themselves, right? Because it makes them feel better for you to say that you're not shit and you don't have shit. It makes them feel better. They can say, well, we have shit and y'all don't, and fucking kick you while you're down. All up and through those threads are foreign blacks basically big upping themselves and offering themselves a pat on the back. But as soon as you say, okay, well, we're not the same or we're different, then we are xenophobic Black Americans who think blackness starts and stops with us. Like, huh? I think right now the conversation needs to switch to those who constantly perpetuate these false stereotypes and narratives and allow everyone to wow out the way they do. Yes, if somebody tells you you don't have shit and you don't have no culture, and your response is to fucking cry like a fucking hit puppy about, I don't have any. Like, folklore are generally short stories passed by word of mouth through generations. I don't know why I have bangs today. I don't know what's happening, guys. Folklore are generally short stories passed by word of mouth through generations. Even children know many of these stories, where you have the same characters in different situations, and these stories are often parables. Like Brer Rabbit, right? Like Brer Rabbit. That's not something you're going to learn about in academia. Again, not to say that type of thing doesn't belong in a classroom setting, because that shit would be cool to learn about in school, and I do think it would be, like, important. But this is stuff that you start picking up on as children, right? It doesn't have, that's not what folklore is, something you learn about in a certain type of legitimate setting. And if you're not learning about it in that setting, it's not fucking real. You get what I'm saying? Some of us would love to learn BA folklore, so it would be nice if folks could share some of these stories. This was also Due to the Black American journey, it would be understandable if many of these stories didn't survive as generations were often disrupted, right? Which people don't even talk about. I've noticed that a lot of young Black creatives have a very nasty habit of assuming, albeit unintentionally, that something they weren't familiar with during their younger years is basically non-existent. I saw a lot of this fuckery during the promo run for Black Panther. The general hype around Get Out and Jordan Peele saying that Black people finally got to see some elevated Black shit once Atlanta hit TV. Meanwhile, there have been Black filmmakers, writers, and artists making all the progressive, subversive protest art portraying each and every facet of the Black American experience for decades. And I agreed. I said, I agree. I super noticed this when Black Panther came out. People were losing their minds like they never saw a Black superhero before. There is a real disdain and disregard for the Black art that came before, especially if it was helmed by a Black American. What did I say in that Michael B. Jordan video? It's like, that shit is a spit in the face to the cultural producers that came before you. Like, Black people and Black Americans especially have been doing art for a long ass time. We've been telling stories for a long time. We've been creating music, fucking food, fashion, art, jewelry, fucking mythology, folklore, culture for a long time. Stop spitting in the face of the people that paved a way for your Black ass to be here because you don't know about them or care to learn. And that's not about fucking academia and academic privilege and having access into spaces. Go fucking talk to an old head. Oh, but y'all don't want to do that because y'all don't like talking to people and you don't know anything about real people, nor do you know anything about real life. There is a real disdain and disregard for the Black art that came before, especially if it was helmed by a Black American. I saw a lot of those Black creatives bending over backwards during Black Panther times to call Meteor Man not a superhero but a comedy, and also calling Blank Man too urban, i.e. ghetto, which I saw with my own eyes. Like Robert Townsend and the Wayans brothers didn't pave the way for their Black asses. Like this disdain. Again, like as if the shit that came before you is not legitimate, is not culture. Because culture is something fucking high and mighty and high motherfucking falutin'. No. That's not it. The New Orleans Mardi Gras Indians, Marie Laveau, I feel like I've never said that out loud, so I might have mispronounced it. A priestess in New Orleans, Octavia Butler, who's a whole Black sci-fi author with loads of books. Black author Ernest J. Gaines uses aspects of folklore and oral storytelling in his fiction. It's one thing to be underinformed, and then it's another thing to be totally uninformed or misinformed. I'm gonna read that again, because that's a good fucking sentence. It's one thing to be underinformed, and then it's another thing to be totally uninformed and misinformed. Again, everybody don't know everything. I don't think that's an excuse to be willfully ignorant, which is a phrase that I use on this channel all the time. People are willfully fucking ignorant. They don't be knowing about shit, and not only do they not know about shit, they don't even want to learn. They're not even curious. They're not even interested. And they don't even think that shit is fucking serious or legitimate. I am aware that I know not even a fraction of all Black American culture, particularly as regards to folklore, so I would not even make a statement like that if I was an individual getting into storytelling. We are not void of folklore as Black Americans. It exists. There is a lack of knowing about it and little attention to it. Michael B. Jordan is getting into this genre of storytelling and failed to do his own research. That's a disservice in itself. Really, it is expected of him to be on this level. And somebody replied, don't forget hoodoo, voodoo, and folklore of the South like Brother Rabbit, Mother Moon, and others. You mentioned some good ones already. I really hate when Negroes speak out of pocket just because they were not taught shit by their family or didn't take it upon themselves to inform themselves. He could have spoke for himself. I would rather him make up some shit despite his lack of knowledge. I love your videos. I'm here for the self-love. We have to fight ignorance from all sides, from our own ignorant peers, from racist whites and fake racist foreigners and foreign Blacks who piggyback off white supremacy to Assange, y'all know I can't pronounce nothing. Their weak egos and fit in. We have our own music and singing style that everyone copies trying to sound soulful. That is culture. We have ring shout. We have our own dialects that are ever present in literature. The Harlem Renaissance was a whole period of black painters, poets, and authors. We have folklore such as John the Conqueror and The People Could Fly. People will go around copying Muddy Waters and Little Walter and then turn around and act like they pulled it from thin air because we don't have folklore, mythology, or culture. Which I really like that comment because that shit is motherfucking true. As if we didn't already feel othered enough, here is Michael B. Jordan clearly making the decision to speak after sipping the Kanye juice. The garbage he gave is infuriating. No folklore, so Zora Neale Hurston did nothing. Octavia Butler, Richard Wright, Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou. He's never heard any stories from these well-known black storytellers. And for the people that are like, well, he's talking that we don't have any stories that are on the screen. In this very video, I brought up fucking Robert Townsend and the Wayans, who have done so much, like really a lot, especially Robert Townsend, who is hugely motherfucking underappreciated for his work. What gets me now is just because he played in Black Panther, he must feel like he is doing something woke, new, and groundbreaking, when in fact there has always been black folklore and mythology stories available to read for the longest time by black authors who never got credit for their original works. The only thing I have to agree with is sometimes we don't research on our own to find things. In his case, if he would have researched, he wouldn't be saying these things. However, the funny thing is, I bet if he does make his company, his folks are going to research and borrow from the same material he says doesn't exist, which a lot of people have been echoing that sort of sentiment of like, people say that, oh, there's nothing, but then you borrow from well-known stories and tropes in Black American culture, mythology, and folklore. So which one is it? So I really just want to end by saying, like, culture, folklore, mythology, all these things, it's not anything that exists in an academic space on a white wall as something that has to be filtered through the white gaze, as something that has to fit into Eurocentric ideas and standards of what makes a culture, quote unquote, legitimate. None of our Black American mythology or folklore has to fit into any of these parameters. It doesn't have to fit into any of these boxes. And it is fine to not know. I was talking to somebody else in the comments that she said, you know, for a long time, I felt the same way. Like, we didn't have anything because that was all I was ever told. And that was what I really, truly believed. I had to take the steps to educate myself, right? So this is why I'm saying that, I'm not saying that it's unimportant that these type of things be taught in a classroom setting, because I do think it is important for these types of things to be taught in a classroom setting. But them being taught in a classroom setting does not suddenly somehow make them legitimate. And it does not disregard the fact that most folklore, mythology, and culture is passed through an oral tradition. It is something that you learn at home, or it is something you learn outside in the streets. It's something that you learn with your friends and family. It's you know, culture is your a part of your essence as a person, your ethnicity and your heritage. And even like, who are you if you don't even believe that you have that? Or you believe that it's something you have to go to school to learn? Or that is something that you have to see in a museum for it to be real. And then you can even see it in a museum. You can see your fucking cross colors, your Carl Kanai, your FUBU in the museum. And you can still turn your nose up on it. Like, well, that doesn't belong in a museum. That's not real. People have an inferiority complex. And it is encouraged. Black Americans specifically have an inferiority complex. And it is encouraged by everyone. And I just want you guys to just let go of all these ideas. Let go of these ideas. What do you guys define as culture? I'm going to leave you with that. You guys know I've been in this habit recently of leaving you with questions, which I like. So let me know what you guys think. I don't know what is happening with this floppiness. Food for thought as always. See you guys next time. Peace.